1917, the Mother of God appeared in Fatima, Portugal, over a 6-month period to 3 small children, Francisco, Jacinta, and Lucia. Of the 3, one survives to this day, Sister Lucia. The Mother of God predicted the end of the First World War, the spread of communism, and the coming of the Second World War. Before you is a series of photographs depicting part of the crowd of 75,000 who witnessed the famous miracle of the sun on October 13th, 1917. We see the crowd braving the rain and the inclement weather. Suddenly they're looking at the sky. Things become dry. The next thing, people are kneeling and praying. What they saw was the sun, which appeared to dance in the sky and then come hurtling toward them. And miraculously, everything returned back to normal. The one remarkable thing was that the wet clothes were dry, even though it had been a torrential downpour, and the clothes, which were caked with mud, were now clean. Our Lady indicated at Fatima that more souls go to hell as a result of sins of the flesh than for any other reason. She also warned of the introduction of certain fashions which would be very offensive to God. I'm Julius Smetona. This is what Catholics believe. With me today to discuss an almost forgotten topic, Catholic modesty, are 2 priests who celebrate the traditional Latin Mass exclusively and who have remained loyal and true to the traditional Catholic religion. Father Clarence Kelly is a superior of the Society of St. Pius V and spiritual director of the Daughters of Mary, a congregation of traditional Catholic sisters in Round Top, New York. Also with us is Father William Jenkins, editor and publisher of the Roman Catholic magazine and pastor of St. Therese Church in Parma, Ohio. Reverend Fathers, perhaps you could begin by just describing the notion of Catholic modesty. What does it deal with? What does it encompass? What is it?
Well, modesty is a due reserve or restraint in a person's speech, behavior, and dress, out of respect for the dignity of human nature, and also out of a healthy fear of human weakness.
Mm-hmm. You know, many would be perhaps not surprised that the Church has teachings on social and moral issues, but they would be surprised that the Church has a teaching on modesty, especially on attire. Does it really? Why is the Church, say, concerned with how people dress?
Well, the Church is concerned with the way people dress precisely because of human weakness due to original sin. You know, after Adam and Eve sinned, they discovered their nakedness, and they were ashamed. And this would be a very natural, a healthy natural reaction. They covered themselves in response to it. And this is a characteristic that separates the human race from any other life form on earth, that it uses clothing. And this is because of the moral dimension of human existence, which no other living being has, as far as we know, in the universe. It is really because man has a conscience and a soul that he does wear clothing, and because that soul has been polluted by sin, that clothing is necessary. The Church is concerned about that because God has, in His wisdom, created man, male and female, and placed between them an attraction, which now is no longer, unfortunately, subject to reason. It is often dominating a person's personality. We not only have masculine and feminine, but we have a preoccupation with the male and the female aspects of a person's personality, to the extent that the very immortality of the soul is somehow lost in the idea of the what God intended to be specifically for the procreation and the perpetuation of the human race. It's taken over as though it's a god or a goddess. And that's why the pagan civilizations throughout the centuries deified this urge of human nature and worshipped it, because it brought them supreme pleasure. And the church, which insists that man is more than certain organs, but that he has an immortal soul to save, insists that that be de-accentuated in order to remember the dignity of the immortal soul created in the image and likeness of God, and that we no longer forget it just for the sake of some impulsive, out-of-control urge of the excitation of certain organs of the body.
Father Kelly, I know this is a very broad question, but what are some guidelines, specific guidelines and Catholic standards of modesty in deportment, dress, and, say, conversation?
Well, to answer that adequately, I think we have to go back again to the point that Father Jenkins made as regards the motive of the Church in prescribing certain standards. And it's a double motive, as he pointed out. One motive is a motive of human dignity, that man, while he does have an animal aspect to his nature, nevertheless is at the pinnacle of creation with the angels. In fact, St. Louis de Montfort actually says that even though the angels are by nature superior to man, man occupies a unique position in creation. And man, St. Louis de Montfort says, is God's special work, because in him everything is summed up, everything in God's universe. But the dignity of human nature, as it was created by God, so that it might be used in accord with the intention of God, and the weakness of human nature. Originally, there was order in human nature. There was no conflict between the lower and the higher. In the Garden of Eden, for example, Adam and Eve never experienced any inclination of the flesh that was contrary to reason. Reason ruled. The lower nature was subordinate, was subject. There was no struggle, there was no effort, there was no war, there was no flesh lusting against the spirit and the spirit warring against the flesh. A perfect order. But as soon as they committed the original sin, not only was death introduced into to the order of things, but also the nature of man was wounded, was very severely wounded. And it was wounded not only with one wound, it was actually wounded with four wounds. The mind was darkened, the will was wounded with a wound of malice, the concupiscible appetites wounded, and the irascible appetites were wounded. So there is a disorder in us now, and we have to come to terms with that disorder. We have inclinations which are contrary to right reason. And so in order to establish the order of right reason, in order to subordinate man to the law of God, you must take certain steps because of the weakness of human nature. And so the Church says, you must do everything in your power to cooperate with the law of God, and part of doing everything in your power is to avoid situations and occasions which would lead you into sin because of human weakness. And so the Church says, since concupiscence is one of the wounds of human nature, since there is an inclination of the flesh contrary to reason, for example, a married man who gives himself to his wife, who is committed to her and in a certain sense consecrated to her, if he exposes himself to dangerous situations, he will have an inclination to commit sin. And so the Church says, don't do that. Don't expose yourself to a dangerous situation. And then the Church says, clothe yourselves properly, avoid things which would stir up the passions and incline a man to go against the right reason. So the Church says to men and to women, clothe yourselves, because you could be the occasion of another person falling into sin. So the Church does have standards. The Church says that God has created everything for a purpose, and God has given his gifts to men, and God has given his gifts to married men and married women. And so therefore, wear modest dresses, wear modest blouses, you know, And for men, the same thing, so that you do not become the occasion of another person's fall. It doesn't mean that we're Quakers, you know, and it doesn't mean that we have to dress everybody up in black, you know, or burlap sacks, or whatever the case may be. And it doesn't mean, you know, that you know, a woman can't, you know, adorn herself within reason, you know, especially a married woman for her husband. She should make herself attractive to her husband, and she should be very careful about many things, and likewise so should he. But the church does say, look, you know, before the time that you have a right to those things that God has bestowed upon man as a reward and a consolation and a means of binding the man and woman together, and for the procreation, primarily for the procreation of human life, before that, be careful. You know, be careful. Take into account your weakness as well as your strength. Dress properly. Avoid books and magazines and TV programs, movies, bad company, things that will lead you down this dangerous and deadly and destructive path. And that is why the insensitivity to standards of modesty has led so many souls into hell. Blessed Virgin Mary said, more souls go to hell for sins of the flesh than for anything else. And the reason is because of this utter disregard for questions of modesty.
You know, the principle is that clothing is meant to conceal, not to reveal. But people dress often today in a very provocative manner. They want attention, and they want to stir up the passions of another person. They want to get a hold on another person's lustful appetite, evidently. This is extremely sinful, scandalous. It's mortal sin to present oneself as an occasion of sin for others. And now, of course, we have many serious crimes against purity that are committed. And I think many of them are out and out provoked by the victims. Not all, of course, and that doesn't justify them. But nonetheless, I think many of these crimes are provoked by the victims themselves, by the way they dress. You know, what is really ironic today is that the Catholic Church is presented as though she were the great enemy of you know, of the proper use of the reproductive powers of the human race, as though she made fun of this, as though she were the one who treated it as though it was something shameful. Nothing could be farther from the truth. The reason why the Church treats it with such care is because the Church considers this to be something sacred. And this is one of the most precious gifts that God has given to mankind. And to bring forth offspring, your own children, is, I mean, it's sort of one of those things that makes you like God, in the sense that God has a son, has generated a son from all eternity, and that God has given to mankind the power of procreation. That's a tremendous gift, perhaps one of the most precious of natural gifts that God has given to mankind, excuse me. But who is, after all, producing all of the foul jokes? Who is treating you know, sex as though it was something shameful, something to be laughed at, you know, behind closed doors? It is the very worldliness that is accusing the Church of treating it as though it were something shameful. They're the ones who are making it ridiculous. The powers that are pointing the finger at the Church for treating this as though it was something shameful are the ones who are making it shameful and making it a comic in the eyes of the world.
You're watching what you talked about, the idea you must dress modestly. Perhaps many people would like to do this, but their question is, what are the standards? Specifically, how does one dress modestly? For instance, Father Kelly, I know in some of the chapels you've served, I've seen post a little bulletin saying these are the standards for modesty in dress within the Church, and perhaps occasionally we see these are more general standards. What are they? How is one to dress?
Well, I think the guideline is what Father Jenkins mentioned, that clothing is meant to cover the body and it is not meant to reveal the body. So in a very specific way, what we require at our Mass centers is, for example, we have this code, and the things that are on the code would be, for example, women, when they sit down, their dresses ought to cover their knees. They are not to wear tight-fitting skirts or tight-fitting blouses or sweaters, but rather those which do not accentuate the lines of the body. And even as far as the men, this is also actually a question of modesty, but it's not so much related to purity, although in some cases it is. You know, they're not permitted to wear clothing to church which would not be reflective of the holy sacrifice of the Mass. You know, they can't wear jeans or
shorts,
right, or polo shirts or anything like that, and that's only reasonable. It is modest again with regard to the comportment of the body. But I would like to say something else. It's a very interesting thing as to why there is an obsession. You see, what Father Jenkins says is very true, that the church has been attacked by exponents of loose living in philosophy, in the media, and so forth and so on. But you have to notice that these very people who attack the church for what they believe is a certain excess are themselves literally obsessed with this. There is an obsession. You don't have to be a rocket engineer to know that American television is obsessed with sex. There's an obsession. The directors, the actors, the writers have this compulsion to constantly talk about, think about, make jokes about, and portray things related to this. And the question is, why? Apart from any evil intention, and in some cases there no doubt an evil intention to corrupt, but even apart from that, the question is, why? Why are they obsessed with this thing? And the answer is that they don't understand that they have a spiritual soul, and that in that spiritual soul there is a quasi-infinite longing for God. They don't understand that what they're searching for when they go from pleasure to pleasure is really God. And because the desire in them is a quasi-infinite desire, it is for something beyond the flesh. No matter how much they satiate the flesh and feed the flesh, they can never be satisfied. In fact, the more they do that, the more they pander to their lower nature, the less satisfied they are. You can take the case of an animal. If an animal has what it needs physically for survival, it's content. There are contented cows, you know. They sit down and chew their cud, and they're perfectly content. Why are they content? The reason they're content is because they have in them a desire for certain things, and when they acquire those certain things, they're content. Man has in himself a desire for the infinite, a desire for the truth, the infinite truth which is God, and the infinite good which is God. And therefore, unless they direct the desires of their souls to an adequate object, that for which their souls were made, they will never be satisfied. They will be obsessed, they will be preoccupied, and they will be perpetually dissatisfied, because all the things that they feed their soul are inadequate.
You know, there was even an expression recently, I think in the advertising industry, that came across in some of the ads for excitement and adventure. They used the word the ultimate, going for the ultimate. You know, you could never get too much. Always go for that step beyond, have a little more. And that's just a craving that they're trying to satisfy by sensual satisfaction that they can never satisfy. It's a desire for Almighty God. But, you know, in former days, dress was very modest. It accentuated the masculine and the feminine. But nowadays, the dress is accentuating the male and the female. The masculine and the feminine pertains to the psychology of a person. But the male and the female pertains to the physical. And that is where the focus is now. And it is really degrading. And this is the whole idea is to turn the reproductive powers into a kind of just a kind of a parlor game, so that we can have an orgy and then destroy the results. You know, take out. The Romans used to gorge themselves with food, take a feather, vomit it all out, and discard it. They're doing the same thing now with sexual relations.
Mm-hmm.
They're indulging in it, taking the result, although in this case, the result is a living being, a child, and they destroy it, and they throw it out in the garbage. It's a terrible degradation, and God holds this to be an extremely evil thing, and He will punish it accordingly.
One of the manifestations of our society is that this tremendous emphasis on everything being co-ed, on the complete breakdown of any distinction between male and female in terms of pursuits, in terms of what they're allowed to, what they do together, what they do apart. We see this, say, in co-ed gyms or health clubs where someone may want to work out or exercise. Years ago, it was males and females or whatever. Now, I don't think you could find one that's just for men only, or one, or very rarely that's for women only. And this extends, you know, to sports and these various things. Is there any danger to this, or is this perfectly natural and we shouldn't be prudish and just accept this?
There's definitely a danger, and also it's interesting that you bring that up, because modern people fancy themselves as being sophisticated. When you talk to them about standards of modesty, they have a tendency to look down their nose, oh, you're old-fashioned, and so forth and so on. We're sophisticated for that. We don't have to go in for that separation business, you know. We can have men and women working together, playing together, doing everything together, and we're mature. And the truth of the matter is that they are the furthest thing from being sophisticated, and all you have to do is look at the statistics for the destruction of marriage, for the widespread abuse of these powers outside of marriage and after marriage. People are not sophisticated today. People today are very much slaves of their lower nature. They are enslaved to their passions, and all of these things foster that. This accentuation, as Father Jenkins says, of male and female, rather than the accentuation of the feminine and the masculine. What that does is it presents a constant series of stimuli which arouse the people, preoccupy them with these things, obsess them with these things, so that even when they realize that these things are empty, because they know they're empty. If they weren't empty, they wouldn't have to go back. I mean, if you're thirsty and you take a drink and you're satisfied with the drink, you don't keep going back to the sink to drink more. If you have to keep going back to the sink and drink 10, 15, 20, 30 glasses of water, if you have any brains at all, you're going to conclude that water doesn't satisfy the thirst, if you have any common sense at all. But these people, they know that. They know in their hearts and souls they're not satisfied. They know there's something missing. There's a profound emptiness. But because our society provides them with this constant series of temptations, they don't have the strength to break away. They don't have the strength to stop and to say, there's something wrong here. This is not what I was made for. I was made for something else, something better, something greater. And that is why standards of modesty are so important, to provide occasions of virtue instead of occasions of sin, to help people to fight against the effects of original sin and against the lusting of the flesh against the spirit. You have to provide people with circumstances in which they can practice virtue. And then when they're able to practice control and virtue, then they are better able to pursue that for which their souls were made, Almighty God. Then they can see, they can understand. They can be then sophisticated in the real sense of the word. They can be mature people acting according to the dictates of reason, with reason subject to God.
You know, almost no one would think twice about, say, any kind of a moral danger of going to a public beach or going to a public swimming pool and we're in mixed company. Is there any danger to this?
There's no question that there's a danger the way people dress today. You know, our blessed Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, he said that if a man looks at a woman with lust, he has already committed adultery in his heart. We are obliged to serve God not only with our external behavior, but with our minds and with our hearts. We have to be pure in thought, in word, in deed, and in desire. And therefore, if we expose ourselves to a danger like that, we are exposing ourselves to what's called a proximate occasion of mortal sin, a near occasion of mortal sin. The average good person who exposes himself to that danger will fall. If you play with fire, you're going to get burned. If you play with the fire of impurity, you will burn for all eternity.
You've been watching